Vesputa. I'm the Tri-State SARE Project Director. Again, just some housekeeping to start, some of the same things that we've heard in the past, but this webinar will be recorded and it will be posted on our website for further reference. Just rest assured the breakout rooms will not be recorded, so go ahead and feel free to interact and communicate as you wish during those. In an effort to decrease any background noise, please keep yourself muted aside from when we were in the breakout rooms. And we certainly welcome and encourage you all to use your video, especially in the breakout rooms. That should allow for much more interaction. Make sure that you have the chat box pulled up on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen if it isn't already there. If it's not, you should be able to find it just by kind of hovering down below in that corner. There should be a little icon there that says chat. Go ahead and click on that. That's how we'll communicate today. You can certainly feel free to enter in any questions you have throughout the workshop, whether they get answered now or in the breakout rooms. We'll make sure they get answered before the end of the webinar. We'll also be posting our links to the pre and post evaluation questions there, so make sure you have that up. If you can't find it, certainly reach out to Mackenzie. She is the one who emailed you out all the information, including the link to get on today. Just a little bit of information about our project. This webinar is part of the Tri-State SARE Professional Development Project, which is funded through the USDA and Northeast SARE. It's a collaborative effort among the universities of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. We are in the first year of a new 3-year project, and we're focusing our efforts this year on pasture management and infrastructure as it relates to sustainable livestock production. So today's webinar is the last in our series on creating a grazing plan. And today, again, will consist of several presentations along with some breakout rooms, allowing for some small group discussions and interaction. All of those exercises were emailed to you in the same email that the link was provided for the webinar today. So certainly, if you have the opportunity, feel free to print them out. If not, make sure that they're handy on your computer so that once we get to those breakout rooms, we can kind of follow along. And no worries about getting to a breakout room. As long as you stay connected, we will move you in and out of them as needed, and you won't have to worry about connecting anywhere else. Just another quick information bit here. We are working towards, or in the early stages of planning our field training workshops for this year. These will also be virtual. We are planning 2 of them. We are going to be focusing on pasture condition scoring, and then the second webinar will be a follow-up to this series on creating a grazing plan. So much more details will be coming in the coming months as we kind of finalize everything. Just a reminder for those about the certificate of participation. If you have attended the previous 3 webinar series and you also do at least one of the following, attend a 2021 summer field training workshop, or have a one-on-one follow-up conversation about your participation, what you have learned, and any additional guidance you would like with one of the program staff, which is either myself, Jean King, or Sam Corcoran, you will be eligible for the certificate, and we will provide that at the end of the year. Another note, again, we are collaborating with the New England Grazing Network this year on our webinar series. This network is made possible by the Cedar Tree Foundation, which is an organization that is committed to regenerative grazing. So Sam Corcoran is the project coordinator. She has been on all of the previous 3 webinars and is on with us again today. You can feel free to contact her at any time if you have any further questions or want some more individualized guidance. Her contact information is currently on the screen, and it is also on our project website as well. I think for now, I'm going to just hand it over real quickly to Joe Bonelli, who is the Connecticut State SARE Coordinator. He's also the PI on this project. And he's going to take a few minutes to discuss some of the grants that are available through Northeast SARE.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for participating in this series of webinars. Very quickly, again, what's on the screen right now is a listing of all the grants that are available through Northeast SARE. You'll notice, I think two I want to mention of note. One would be the farmer grants, and those are for farmers to apply, and these are up to $15,000 of grants, and this is not matching, by the way, up to $15,000. My understanding is they're going to be doubling that very soon as well too, and those should be opening up again. You see there in the application due date in late fall. The date has not been established yet, to my knowledge, but again, if you're interested in that grant, please feel free to reach out to me or go on to the Northeast SARE website as well too. That'll be a late fall application deadline. The partnership grants are currently open, and unfortunately, the time to file the application is coming very soon. It's the 13th, I believe, of April, so not a lot of time if you want to apply for that. But that's where live service providers could work with a farmer on an idea as well too. You'll note other grants that are available there as well too, and different kind of programs and eligible applicants, et cetera. And also, lastly, want to draw your attention to all the resources that are available at Northeast SARE as well too, in terms of materials that you might find helpful and interesting. And again, also the search feature as well too. If you're looking to apply for a grant of some kind, a recommendation would be to search out what Northeast SARE has done in the past. It might give you a sense basically of what they're looking at, what they're looking for grant applications as well too. So without further ado, turn it back over to Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. And enjoy the program, everybody.
Thank you, Joe. And as Joe was mentioning, certainly feel free to reach out at any time. You'll also find on our project website, there is a state coordinator for both Massachusetts and Rhode Island. So if you are from one of those respective states and interested in some information or some more details about the grants through Northeast SARE, certainly reach out to them as well, and they can give you some guidance. At this point, I think we'll move into our pre-evaluation questions for today. So Mackenzie will post the link for us in the chat box. Go ahead and click on that link. It should connect you to Slido. That will present a series of questions. Answer those, and as you're scrolling down, you should see a green submit button on the bottom. I'll give us all a couple minutes to do that now. All right, so lastly, I think I would just like to introduce today's speakers before we move into presentations. All of them should look familiar to you. We are welcoming back Damon Mee, who grew up on a farm in New Hampshire, earning his MS at Michigan State University. He then worked for UNH Extension on the Dairy, Livestock, and Forage Crops team. In 2016, he started at NRCS as the New Hampshire State Grazing Specialist. In this role, he supports the NRCS staff and farmers statewide to further their understanding of their animal and forage management. He is also on the New Hampshire FPAC Beginning Farmer team and is in New Hampshire NRCS Organic State Contact. Damon is an active member of the Granite State Grazers Board since 2013 and is on the executive committee of the Northeast Pasture Consortium. Our second speaker today is Susan Parry. Again, she joined us in webinar 1 and has been on in the past webinars, just not as a presenter. She is a Pennsylvania State Grassland Conservationist for NRCS. She develops technical guidance for conservation standards related to agriculture and grazing, implements training programs for NRCS staff and service providers, and assists in the coordination of the Pennsylvania Grazing Lands Coalition. Susan has a degree in environmental resources from California University of Pennsylvania and a degree in public administration with a minor in environmental policy from Penn State Harrisburg. She's a volunteer member of several community-based organizations and emphasizes stewardship of the natural resource base in both her career and personal activities. And lastly, a seasoned speaker in our series today is Jennifer Colby. She is part of the UVM Center for Sustainable Agriculture's Pasture Program for 16 years. She's been coordinating that for the last 10. She has served as the Vermont Grazing and Livestock Conference organizer and developed a long-standing partnership with the Vermont Grass Farmers Association. Recently, she managed a UVM team providing technical assistance in the Long Island Sound watershed and was the co-chair of the Vermont Farm to Plate a networks production and processing working group. She is also an advisor for the Randolph Technical Career Center Agriculture Program, and she has taught part-time at Sterling College and Vermont Technical College. Jen has operated a diversified meat livestock farm since 2000. So those three will be our speakers today, and I think without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen and we'll jump into Damon.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Yeah, I think I decided I'm going to forego PowerPoint slides today because all it would be really is you know, looking at words. So I figured I'd just talk with you guys for a little bit. I did, I'll put a disclaimer out. I did put or come down with a little bit of a cold, so I may cough a little bit, but I'll try and avoid that as much as possible. So what I wanted to talk with you folks about today is it's an important part of the plan, which is contingency plans. So if you've been a part of this series up till now, what you've gone through is kind of writing down what you know, kind of figuring out if you are in a situation that is reasonable for your land. So do you have the right number of animals for your land? Do you have the right amount of feed? Do you have, you know, you've gone through a lot of those calculations, and then drawn out your infrastructure and kind of laid out where you think things will work best. So, you know, that works great when things work great. Um, but but you need to be ready for when things don't go as planned. And that can be really crucial to the success of your operation long term. So that's where these contingency plans come into play. And also, what Susan will be talking about a little bit later is it's also important when things are going pretty well to pay attention to what's happening and assess how you're doing. But Susan will get into that a little bit later. The part I'm going to be talking about is kind of when things don't go so well. And so you want to think about certain management pinch points that you may run into over the course of a grazing season, or also throughout the winter. You know, we focus a lot on the grazing season, but if you're having animals year round, that's, you know, winter is a significant part of the year and a significant part of your management. But what you know, if we're going to the thinking about the grazing season, we want to think about, well, you know, up in this part, we're looking like we're going to be in a multi-year drought. So, you know, a drought contingency plan is always a good idea. That can also be as you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a drought, but you know, a contingency plan for, you know, some times that are a little bit dry, or you don't have the desired forage regrowth that we often see later in the summer. And so, you know, that can be one of the plans, you know, or the opposite, getting too much water. And so in our session, we're going to do a breakout session in just a little bit, and we're going to go over. So I want you to start thinking about in your operations where some of those management pinch points might be, and what you might do in terms of your reaction to certain conditions. The real important point with these contingency plans is, yes, you have a plan. You know what you're going to do, and it's going to work with your goals. You know, refer back to the goals that we set in the first session. Make sure that your goals are being met as much as possible with the contingency plans. But the real important point is really identifying a fairly clear trigger of when you put those contingency plans into action. I can't tell you how many times I've been working with farms that have said, well, you know, I think I see some rain in the forecast coming up. So I'm not gonna go into the drought contingency plan just yet. And then they wait just a little bit longer, and then, oh well, maybe we'll still get some. Farming is a trial of constant optimism, right? So if you're too optimistic though, and you avoid going into your contingency plans, you may finally decide to do them at too late of a point. So having a clear idea of uh, when you should, or when it fits with your system to move into those contingency plan operations is really important. That way it takes our kind of human waffling out of it. um, so um, and those trigger points can be a little bit hard to define, but it's worth at least thinking about. And a lot of these contingency plans you're not going to get right the first time. So it's again, this whole planning process is an iterative process. It has to be a living document. What every year, every kind of major event, you might want to think back, oh, how'd that go? What do I need to do differently? And be ready to change things. So same goes with the contingency plans. So what I think I will do, and that's, I had a little bit more time allotted to talk about this, but I want to get into that's all I really had for the warm up. I want to get into the 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 breakout sessions, sorry. And but I thought I'd just give a little bit of a warm up for what's going to happen in these breakout sessions. I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot of good discussion. And my thought is that, we're not that there's a number of suggested contingency plans here that are good to have in this worksheet. My thought is, depending on how much discussion we have, we may not make it through all of them. But I think it's worth working through them as kind of an exercise to get you thinking in that manner. And so if you are a farmer, you can think about your own operations. If you are a service provider, which we have quite a few of in here, kind of think about how you've seen farmers react in, the farmers that you've worked with react in these situations, and maybe how what you've seen that has worked, and what could work better. So then, going through, and I've created some basic scenarios, and going through and then just deciding which of these makes the most sense for your operation. And they could also, it could just be one of them only makes sense, or it could be a few of them in a certain order. So if there are a few of them in a certain order, um, like with drought, the reduced herd size might be lower on the list rather than some other things. Then you can put numbers next to these instead of just an X, or some way of selecting it. So that is all I wanted to say for kind of warming us up for that. And unless there are any questions right off the bat, I think, or any of my co-presenters want to chime in at all, anything I might have missed or anything, but I think we could go into the breakout sessions.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope all those breakout sessions were constructive and useful for you. I just want to double check. We have a little bit of feedback, so if everybody's willing to mute themselves, that might help us here. Damon, did you have any wrap up that you wanted to do before we jump into Susan? You're muted, Damon.
I think Jen had some sort of nugget of wisdom that we definitely don't want to miss out on, but give her an opportunity to share what I may have missed. We had a great session. I don't have anything too much to add to what I said
Okay.
earlier. So if Jen, yeah, now that I set you up for high expectations, you know.
It's totally
Take it
not
away.
my nugget of wisdom, so thank you. I'm happy to share somebody else's. So these contingencies were largely around the natural resource contingencies that we might bump into. But looking at this list, it really reminded me of people contingencies, and this was something that they teach in Ranching for Profit is thinking about how to different ways to manage risk, and one of the riskiest things being people. And they have what are just as you think about your contingency plans, they have what are called the 5Ds: death, disability. I'll put this in the chat. I don't have to take notes. Death, disability, divorce, disagreement, pre-divorce, depression, where nothing moves. And then in the last few years, they've also started to add a sixth one, which is drugs, because there's lots and lots of families that have had drug issues break things up. And oh, thanks, Joe. Perfect. Anyway, I found that to be, a lot of the contingency plans that we think about for natural resource challenges are also appropriate, but there might be some things that we think about for the people side that might be appropriate for natural resources. So good risk management is good risk management, I guess. Anyway.
Yeah, I think
that's from Dave Pratt of Ranching for Profit. That is not my nugget of wisdom, but I love it.
Those are also very important. You're right. I did stick just to kind of the natural world and concerns, I guess, or issues that might arise. But I think you're also planning on talking a little bit later on about kind of the market. We need to have contingencies for changes in market, or things of that nature as well. So that's I didn't get into those, but those are equally important. So yeah, I think that just about does it for contingency plan stuff. So I guess we can pass it over to Susan.
Okay. Thanks. You're right on time. Thank you, Damon. And I have to admit, you did a great job with the exercise, but I didn't fully read it, and it wasn't bolded where you ranked. So we were just chatting, and someone mentioned, hey, maybe we could rank these. So I'm sorry I missed that as the moderator. So anyway, hi everybody. I love the 6Ds. I'm gonna have to keep those in mind too. And Damon and I both work for NRCS, so we certainly are limited by the fact that we work with conservation, and that's something I wanted to point out too. I'm going to share my screen, and then I'll mention that a couple times throughout. Really we're talking about on the land at this point, but we do need to talk about those human considerations as well. Let me just get to screen 2. Okay, let me know when you're seeing my presentation.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, without notes, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Damon. Okay, good morning, everybody. And again, my name's Susan Parry. I'm the State Grassland Conservationist for Pennsylvania Natural Resource Conservation Service. So because we have a varied webinar group, some are farmers, some landowners, and some advising of service providers or ag providers, I'm going to also talk in fairly basic terms. So some of this might be review for some of you. And my role in this session is talking about two aspects of planning that really can't be overlooked, in my opinion, is kind of that implementation and evaluation, looking back and saying, okay, this is the way I planned it. Did it work the way I planned? And if not, what do I need to do to adapt that? And So just like conducting, when I spoke on the earlier webinar, it was about resource inventory. So just like when you do an inventory and start your plan, looking at what you have on your operation, you're walking the pasture, and the more systematic you can be about implementation and evaluation, the more streamlined the process may feel to you. Again, there are times when you're going to have to fly by the seat of your pants, but if we can plan ahead for some of these things, in addition to contingencies, looking back and saying, did the actions that I put into place as my implementation, did they work? And if not, how do I need to adjust? So we'll talk about, I have just a few slides, and I did rely on PowerPoint, and then we'll go through an exercise after that. So what I'll cover is implementation schedule, your prioritization of the things you're going to do first, second, third. That becomes your schedule. And you do need to prioritize, because we really are only human, and you can't do everything at once, especially if there are resources connected with that thing that you're going to do as an action item. So in general, it's practical with any type of project. And again, I'm coming from a technical background, from a planner background. So I consider even working with a farmer as a project to me. And hopefully you all see what you're doing on the farm as a life project. So we first want to develop that plan, which you've done over the last 3 webinar sessions. And then we're going to put that into action. We're going to implement it. And then finally, we're going to evaluate success and make adaptations. You know, do you need funds for the things that you've decided on, things that you've decided you need to do on your operation? Or if you need to install fence and watering, which one makes sense to do first? It may not make sense to put in water lines if you're putting in permanent fencing. So again, we need to look at those things ahead of time, and then look back and evaluate the things we've installed and or done to get our operation to where we want it to be. You know, does your plan incorporate small incremental changes, or is it a complete overhaul of the way you're currently managing? Are you going from, you know, a conventional type operation to a rotation? Do you need to start from scratch? So ask yourself those questions, and we'll move forward based on what your prioritization is. And it makes sense on any operation or in any business to decrease that risk by making sure you're operating efficiently. That's when that human risk management comes in. So the disclaimer again is that we're talking more about conservation, because this whole series is about developing your grazing plan today, for today. And although we're not talking about business operations, I think Jen will talk about that a little bit afterwards. But we also want to include a review of your costs and inputs through your business plan when you go to that evaluation. So as we've been talking through all these sessions, we really do want to take a whole farm system approach. And I couldn't resist putting the steps of planning in here. You know, really when you're doing anything, you know, when you get started, you're kind of identifying, is this the idea I'm taking on? What do I have to start with? What are my options to move forward? And then again, what are your decisions to make? And then I'm talking about the last 2 phases, which are implement and evaluate. So I did also, just one more time, I'm going to mention why we need a plan. So I'm a big fan of Ralph Waldo Emerson, and this is a quote from him. Few people have any next. They live from hand to mouth without a plan and are always at the end of their line. So again, do you want to be adaptive or reactive? So a plan is very important when you're talking about your life's goals and your life's work. And what, you know, again, what does your plan look like? It might be that you've worked with NRCS, you have a map with your tract and your fields delineated. You've put on there everything you could possibly do for your grazing plan. You have a nice map, and you want to implement based on that. And we can help to schedule that implementation so that you're doing things as they make sense or as we recommend them. But you may not have that. You may just have a piece of paper. You may have a honey-do list. You may have something like this handout here where it's an action plan and you have the steps outlined and the cost, the outcome, and the day that you want to complete that. You might be a fan of Gantt charts, where you're kind of doing a general timeline and how much you want to complete at a certain time of year, or things that you want to put off till next year. Or you may be a fan of Troy Bishop's grazing plan. He puts just about everything on his chart in the barn, and so it doesn't matter what it looks like as long as you make it the best it can be. So again, this is when we look at the inventory phase, we're coming back to that inventory phase and saying, this is what I want to think about when I'm implementing my plan. What are the human resources I need to consider? What are those 6 Ds if I need to consider those things? What's the lifestyle I want? What are my financial goals? That sort of thing. Do I have enough labor? Those are the things we want to think about when we're evaluating what we've done, and also when we're planning for that grazing system that we're putting in place. We also have land and natural resources to think about, which is what I'll primarily focus on. So under resources and infrastructure, we've talked about all this. You've learned how to calculate your stocking rate within your fields. You've learned how to plan out your paddocks. You've learned about, watering and laneways and watching animal behavior in terms of what their needs are. You've thought about the water system that you have, as long as, and how far they have to travel for water. You've planned all that out. So in this fourth session that we have, we're thinking about all those things that we've put in our plan, and we're looking back. So what parts of those lists are most crucial for your rotational grazing system? What do you have? What do you need? And what can you do without at this point? That's what's going to be part of your implementation schedule, as well as stepping back and then evaluating. I talked to one of my Grazing Coalition colleagues the other day, and he had just gotten done walking his entire fence system. He said, I've been doing that for years and years and years, and my fence has lasted over 40 years. So really, maintenance is important, especially with water and fencing and those things that can go wrong. Just to share real quick, a watering system issue. We had an engineer that was in the job for 35 years. He developed a gravity-fed system. I think someone talked about it when we were talking about watering a couple sessions back. He developed a 25 paddock watering system that had 11 hydrants that were shared between paddocks, but it was set high on a hill, so it was gravity-fed. About a year into it, they could get no water out of any of them. So they had to, again, portable troughs and that sort of thing. They had to have a contingency because the water system didn't work here. And they tried to blow it out. It turns out they had gotten an airlock, which I think either Jen or Damon talked about in a previous session. But here they blew it out, and here comes this big snake. And turns out he was very afraid of snakes. So, those kind of things would happen. And if you weren't going back and evaluating, even when you have issues, then you wouldn't find out and or be able to write the issues. Damon, are you going to say something? Oh, I saw your smiling face there. So anyway, I'm going to move forward and talk about forage because I think as far as the grazing operation, we're essentially harvesting the pasture grasses and the plants with animals. So I have one farmer that's close to my heart that always says grass is king. So that's what I feel might be something useful to talk about right now is pasture productivity. Because without that, you really can't fully implement the rest of your plan. So monitoring, again, if you're a science type, you might want to look real close. You might want to use a quadrat and do some measurements of, the different diversity in your pasture and or your dry weight. you might just want to stand back with this jersey and say, hey, what does this look like today? Can I move to this paddock today? So no matter what, observations you're making, whether it's on paper or whether it's, just standing back and looking, you become the best observer for your own operation. So different types of pasture monitoring, walking the pasture, making those visual observations. We have, again, into the data collection part, I would be remiss in not putting on my scientist hat and saying data collection is great because you can look back. I've had a grazer up in the northeast of Pennsylvania that grazes through. He's almost 365, and he said, I can tell you where that cow was last year at this time because I keep fastidious records. So record keeping is very important. But walking the pasture, there's real simple ways that you can go into your pasture and do some measurements. And pasture condition scoring, I'll talk about that very quickly at the end of this presentation. But I know we talked about grazing sticks, and there's a great University of Vermont, Sarah Flack actually is doing it. There's a great YouTube video of showing how to use the grazing stick. That's a great way to inventory your pasture. We also have a step point where you're walking along a line in the pasture or you're zigzagging in the pasture and just recording what your foot hits. You can put a little mark on your boot, or you just look at where your foot hits. Remember, it's the one foot or the other, and you record what's there. And if you do that 25, you can multiply by 4, and you look for a representative area in your pasture, and it's a real easy method to get an idea of your pasture health. We also have what we call the Guide to Pasture Condition Scoring. This was first developed in 2001 by Jim Cropper, who is a researcher, and a whole group. It's now the Northeast Pasture Consortium was behind the PCS way back when, and NRCS just recently actually rolled out last year in January 2020, had a national group that got together and updated this. So after 3 years and hours of discussions and testing and retesting, we've come up with a really good visual way to score your pastures. And this can be done at the beginning, middle, and end of the season. It can be done, I've done this with farmers, and it really is a good way to, they're always excited to see what their score is the next time that we go out. We do trainings on farms a lot. And there's many times where the farmer is more excited about hearing their score from year to year or from season to season than learning about the whole system. So it really is a good, you can see around this wheel, we kind of think of it as cogs in the wheel. There's 10 different indicators. The main concept of pasture condition scoring is these 10 pasture indicators. We look at a 1 to 5 point ranking visually that can be done many times over the grazing season. And for those of you who are NRCS planners, this is our required assessment tool in beginning your planning process for pasture. So around the circle, we have desirable plants, percent legume. And again, the goal for legume is typically 70-30, grass to legume, live plant cover, plant diversity. It gets into soil utilization and livestock areas, soil compaction, and then plant vigor and erosion in general. So this is Bob Hendershot from Ohio always said, you can't manage what you don't measure. So consider formalizing your monitoring to really get an idea of what your pastures look like from season to season. And that can be a way to monitor and measure your success. This is what the sheet looks like. And again, it's very colorful. Green is good, yellow not so good. But overall, you just add up your scores. You score from 1 to 5 along this axis, and then add up your scores here. And there's some management suggestions or recommendations that come based on your score, whether it's individual to a field or your overall operation if you've done multiple fields. And it does also apply to all livestock types. So depending on desirability is one place where you really want to think about the livestock type and what is desirable for that type. So it's about keeping records and measuring your success, looking back and measuring success. And I think that was the last slide. Again, I think there's going to be a whole session on the PCS, so that's a great thing. Thank you for mentioning that, Rachel. And we're going to go into the breakout. Hopefully all of you got the handout that I sent, and we're going to look at developing your implementation schedule and talking about walking through that evaluation phase. So I think at that point, Mackenzie, we're ready for breakouts again, unless somebody has something to add, somebody from the group or one of the other instructors.
All right, everybody. So I think we made it in and back out of our breakout session. Susan, did you have anything else you wanted to add quickly before we jump over to Jen?
No, I just wanted to thank everybody for their participation. And I do want to note, Jen, I saw we were talking about whiteboards. It can be as simple as having a whiteboard that says grazing metrics and all those post-its behind you. So no, I'll turn it over to Jen or Rachel. Thank you.
Take it away, Jen.
That's so funny that, yeah, the daily metrics are supposed to be a business metric, but we'll see. Okay, I split the difference between you both. So I have 1. I just have all right, are you all seeing my slide?
We're seeing your web page.
You're seeing my web page. Oh, so that's not the right one. All right, stop sharing. I will go back again and we will share. Should be my closing thoughts.
There you go.
There you are.
All right, you all seen that? Okay, we'll do that. Okay. So I split the difference. We only have, everything's just on 1. So I was thinking about this since you all asked me to do the intro back when we started this. And then also I thought, how could we wrap this up? And when you're thinking about going through all these different pieces of a grazing plan, and it may feel like you have to do all the pieces. It may feel like, you have to do all the pieces right, in the right order, in the right way. And just start. If there was one particular piece that you took away from us putting together this series, start with that. If there's one particular thing that resonated with you, you don't have to have a whole complete grazing plan. Just start with your infrastructure. Just start with your calculations. That's the hardest thing, is to start someplace. So if this series has helped you to find that starting place, then you're primed to set up your action list, which Susan just gave you a great template for. But don't feel like you have to have it all figured out. And that's an okay thing to do. And just start, and then add another thing every year. Add another thing to watch. Add another piece of your system to improve upon. One of my breakout group folks, James, said he's been grazing for 20 years, and he learns something new every he learns something new every time. And I feel exactly the same way, that pick just 1 or 2 things to refine. Don't feel like you have to fix it all. And we're not gonna achieve 37,000 things, as much as we'd like to do that. And if you're doing a thing and it feels like it's not working, it is okay to stop doing that, or it's okay to pull it apart, look at it creatively, and try it in a different way. And maybe the different way is to actually stop doing that. I can think of many folks who have decided that they did dairy for a long time. They realized dairy wasn't a good fit for them. they moved into beef, they moved into non-ruminant animals. There are certainly folks who have no animals in the winter. They've gone from a breeding operation to something where they're just focused on grazing in the summer, or folks who've even stopped grazing because they didn't actually enjoy grazing, but they went into something else. It's okay to do those things. And even if we're writing a grazing plan, we know that we're thinking about something that is a year-round system, unless we don't want it to be a year-round system, in which case, then we can pull animals out in the wintertime. That's an okay thing to do. We can also stop doing something in a particular way and be really crazy and out of the box. There's a great example from Alan Savory, the co-founder of Holistic Management, where there was a tremendous drought in Rhodesia, and he took multiple groups of cattle and he put them in different grazing rotations, and he put them all together in a mega herd in order to extend the length of regrowth time. And it was considered to be just, you know, a radically out of the box kind of a thing to do. And it was successful, and he was able to carry many of those animals through by doing something just differently. That's okay. So so create systems as you go forth, as you think about this, create systems that will make your job easier if you can, if you possibly can. If you can set up fence subdivisions ahead of time, if you're not in the middle of trying to hay and trying to graze and realizing that you have to set up a new paddock every single day. If you can do as many of those things ahead of yourself to make things easier for you at the times of the year or the times of the day or the times of the week where you know that you are busier and it's harder, everything is harder. We want to set you up for success. So if you can set yourself up for success, that's even better, because we can't be there with you all the time. Do whatever you can in the simplest way to track your changes and to celebrate some of those small wins, those big wins, small wins, all of the wins. We've talked about different ways to evaluate and to track what you're doing. If you're a person who wants to work with a grazing stick and write those down every day, awesome. If you're a person who works with a grazing chart, really likes that, that's awesome. If you're a person who likes to take pictures wherever on every day that you move the animals, or every time you move the animals, you take a picture of the conditions that are there. What does the plant diversity look like? What's the height look like? How are the animals doing? If you take pictures, you can still go back and look at those things. But you don't have to do all of those things either. Pick something that you feel like you can consistently do. Because when you go back and look at those pictures a year later and you say, oh my goodness, we got through a drought and look how rough everything looked, but I can see those pictures and the animals looked okay. That's a way to know, all right, we were doing a good job. We might do things differently in the future, but it's good to know, and you have some kind of a record. It's just another different way to do it. Be kind to yourself, because the seasonal variation is pretty huge. I myself have been in this exact same situation. A couple of years ago in particular, I felt like I was trying to do a really good job with my animals. But my pastures just, in June, late June, everything was headed out. It looked really terrible. Everything was sort of uneven. And I reached out to friends and said, boy, am I messing this up? And they said, give it a little bit of time. Give it a little bit of time. By the time you get to July, you'll be happy that it looks like this right now. And in July, I was happy. I still had plenty of ground cover. I had plenty of soil cover because I had left all of that headed up stuff, and there's plenty of new growth coming underneath, and that was totally fine. So just understand that what you see in June and what you see in July and what you see in September, just be kind to yourself, because it's going to look really different from time to time, and it doesn't mean you've messed it up. And also recognize, not only is there seasonal variation, but there's also going to be things that you do now that you won't see for a few months or you won't see until next year. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not good. So we have to have patience with ourselves around that. We were just in our breakout group, we were just chatting a little bit about not grazing too early in the season, like not grazing too early right now. And it's so tempting. And with the drought last year, there's shortages of feed, or there's shortages of pocketbook in terms of being able to buy feed. And so it's so tempting when the grass starts to come, and hopefully we've done our jobs in this series where you recognize why that might not be the best thing to put the animals out right now. But putting the animals out so early when those plants are so tender and the root systems are so tender and the compaction from the mud can limit the plant growth, you could see that reverberate through the whole season. And it's the same kind of a thing. This season, this year, we're going to see what the results were, good or bad, from how we managed last year. So we just have to be kind to ourselves. We don't always see it immediately. Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. So just recognize the cool part is this year could be much better than last year because you did manage the drought well last year. So just be prepared for that. Maybe you'll have really excellent things, better than you think. And then I guess the last thing is you're not alone. So a thing that has kept me personally, like not only wanting to be a grazer, but wanting to continue to work with grazers all of my career, has been that this is a group of people who exist to help each other. And we recognize that we can learn some of these basics in a short course like this, but testing these and trying them and doing them and learning from them is a lifetime of experience and tweaking, and going to conferences and finding out that other folks are struggling with exactly the same thing we are, or asking folks, to take a look and see if they see what you see or I see when we look at our pastures. This is a group of folks that are there for each other, and we're not alone in this. And so we can always improve, we can always do better, but those contingency plans, like every year there's a new contingency that's going to come up, and that's okay. But I just want to encourage us all to lean on each other because that's what we're here for. And with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Rachel, and I will say thank you all very much for joining us because this has been a whole lot of fun.
Thank you, Jen and Damon and Susan. I think I'll pick up right where Jen left off as we're wrapping up our series and wishing you guys all well out in the field this year. Please remember that we will still all be here, and you can reach out at any time. So our contact information is on our project page that has been included in nearly all of the emails that I have sent out to you or Mackenzie has included to you. So certainly if you need some suggestions or have some questions, want some more guidance, we are here. So don't ever hesitate to reach out. In addition to that, I'm hoping to kind of keep our momentum going. So while our series is wrapped up for now, we will still be in contact. My colleague Jean King, who for any of you have been part of this project in the past, should know her quite well. She will be following up with everybody who was part of our webinars and just kind of getting your questions and getting your thoughts and feedback and what we could do moving forward, what you need for more education and such. So certainly, make sure that as she gets in touch with you, you can provide your thoughts to her as well. And in addition to that, I will also be sending out correspondence emails as spring rolls into summer and then into the fall too. So there will be some good resources there based on what we've seen people needing more assistance with as these webinars have passed. So those will be coming and in the works also. Let's see, what else did I want to mention? Just a reminder about our summer field workshops. That's another piece that we will kind of pick back up on this series as well, because one of the workshops will be a direct relation to this grazing plan series, where we go out and visit a farm and look at their grazing plan and how they manage their animals, their livestock, look at some of their records. Some of that information is in the works now. We will be working with several people who are on this series too, so it's kind of a great continuation, and we can kind of pick up midstream in the summer. And they will be virtual, but we are planning to get out into the field and do a lot of filming, so we will have some pictures and some videos to go along with our virtual workshops for the field. The second workshop will be on pasture condition scoring. So Susan did a great introduction to that, and I think there'll be more details on that to follow as well. So watch for those. And I think lastly is just thank you all for attending this series. I hope that the farmers in our group have been finding it useful towards working towards your own personal grazing goals. And then, of course, our service providers, I hope we've given you the tools and the knowledge you need to be able to help the farmers that you work with day in and day out in creating a grazing plan for themselves. And with that, lastly, we are just looking to do a post-evaluation for today's webinar. So Mackenzie will post that in the link. And if you would please take a moment to fill those out. I use these evaluations and the results of them often to figure out what further training and education we need to provide moving forward. So I appreciate the feedback. And with that, if there's anybody else who has questions, please get them into the chat. I will make sure that I look at those questions and get you in contact with the right people as time goes on. And I guess that's all. We'll send you off. Good luck in the fields this year, and we'll be in touch for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks everyone.